After the end of the Analytic-Synthetic Distinction, I feel it's still all right to comment critically about W.V.O. Quine's thesis in the two dogmas of empiricism and how it developed an epistemological criteria subsequently that was still inconclusive. W.V.O. Quine was a very clever thinker and left many things unsaid. Quine, in his book Ontological Relativity, broadly described the nature of human language and epistemology reflected through language, yet he left many things unsaid about what the implications of his theoretical parameters were regarding epistemology. I have insufficient time here to do more than sketch and outline my criticism of the topic, yet perhaps it requires a lot more than that. A default position might be that everything said scientifically about the world is right. Naive reality would be the best and true, yet we know that isn't so with our common philosophical reasoning about quality, shapes, and forms of things perceived by the senses and given order in the mind. Science confirms that many unknown structures exist, and our language about such at some point is abstract and rather analytic instead of just synthetic, mind plus observation. When the analytic-synthetic distinction ended, it was, in effect, blended into one context in favor of the synthetic or phenomenal. Synthetic language previously had been regarded by empiricists as directly descriptive of the observable world useful to science, and statements made about such were taken as meaningful, while intentional inward analytic thought was taken as psychological spinning of wheels without meaning a priori referring to the outside world of reality. Quine basically found that all language has one source and validity as epistemological units. He created a kind of linguistic monism, and with C.S. Peirce and perhaps James or Dewey, the pragmatic use value of statements would be found in their correspondence to function concepts, reference terms, and such that work. Rather than accelerate a concise description of the boundary parameters of post-analytic synthetic distinction epistemology, I will instead use Quine's idea of language as ontology, Kant's ideas of the difference between the noumenal and phenomenal, and Descartes' metaphysical doubt as foundation elements of making a functional post-empiricist synthetic analytical epistemology criteria. In the language ontology paradigm that replaced the prior empiricist paradigm, pragmatism prevails within language. Specialized lexicon and data sets are developed that comprise ontology that relate to reference targets of existential phenomenal kinds. What can be said truthfully about the world experience is built within a given ontology. The ontology is subjective yet social, existential yet scientific. Science itself has worked within a pragmatic ontology that may have entirely wrong parameters that are yet consistent with given physical observations. Perhaps all that can be said scientifically about things are quantitative and statistical reference sets. In the ontology of post-empiricist epistemology, the word physical, like all others, is given a relative rather than an absolute value. That does not mean that nothing is real. It simply means that all things are interpreted and understood with a kind of relative phenomenalism, such as Descartes experienced with his cogito ergo sum, and subjective contingence in experiencing reality as a secondary rather than a primary or direct experience of things in themselves. Though all things experienced by human thought are filtered and shaped by human cognitive capacities, the pragmatic application of thought and experience, science, and philosophy is in the use it has in understanding the universe and reality such as is possible. With Kant, we realize that there is an ultimate reef of social or innate human cognitive solipsism that makes our knowledge only partial, not absolute, and pragmatic rather than omniscient. Of course, the world itself at the quantum level is rather foggy, uncertain, and probabilistically described, encountered, or experienced. We might say our limits of knowledge may comprise two aspects of the noumenon. Type A is the knowledge we have not got within the pragmatic realm of possible human experience of the universe, and the other is that which cannot be known from a human sentient perspective within any possible circumstances, and such certainly seems likely to exist. Why evolution and creation are true. The universe is said by scientists to be about 13.7 billion years old. It is logically reasonable that God sent his son Jesus Christ to the universe and people at a fortuitous space-time moment in its history. An infinite God contacting finite sentient life forms in a temporal phenomenal universe is quite a decent thing to do. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, and life on it took all that time to evolve. Humans should respect that moose, mosquito, that elephant, and those whales, for when they are gone, there will not be enough time remaining in the Earth's future to evolve the like new from scratch. The brain size nor thinking processing speeds may be modest in non-philosophical mammals and bugs, yet they are the best the creation has produced so far. Where the proximal motivating life force came from for Earth's biospheric origin isn't the point to argue pro-con creation by God. From stars, from stellar materials, elements produced in stellar synthesis, He created the universe and all things in it, though people and circumstance act occasionally to modify aspects of it. People exist simultaneously in the universe, the ecosphere, and its history, regardless of the time literals and values and misinterpretations of Genesis and its composition. The world has only a scant 500 million years to go before the inflation of the sun overheats it so far as to make life here impossible, and probably less than 100 years before global warming causes significant political and social issues. More efficiently, though, human-caused global heating may hasten the demise of human life on Earth within a shorter time period, as James Lovelock referred to in The Vanishing Face of Gaia, the final warning. One may be sure that God evolved the world, and that words like evolution are embedded in lexical construction word sets that change and mostly reflect human understanding of things. Words and human ideas haven't got a kind of innate Platonic realm of form's inerrancy. We may believe that Noah saved representative mammals from local extinction during an era of global warming, flood surging over lowlands of the Persian Gulf or somewhere else, perhaps 15,000 years ago when Antarctica sloughed off an ice sheet, suddenly raising the world's sea level 45 feet. Jonah may have been clubbed and tossed into the dark hold of a ship, and then onto a beach, believing that he was in the belly of a whale for a few days, and that Saul became Apostle Paul after encountering the resurrected Jesus several times, and that the Spirit of God moved upon the void, a mystery beyond the understanding even of physicists and philosophers concerned with various cosmological theories today, quantum mechanics. How can anything exist, even God, from the very beginning? Our beliefs may be true corresponding to the historical reality. We do not know from experience, even though God may be able to produce realities and universes easier than a dreamer producing dreams. And even so, the proximal historical facts of evolution in this proximal universe may be true as well. God controls all of the constants and variable values of the universe, all of its space-time dimensions, virtual particle waves, membranes, certainty and uncertainty from His own being. Few Christians know much about the history of how the New Testament was put together. They don't know where John the Baptist grew up, if he had his own cave or not. They might even search the scriptures for references to cosmological construction, and mostly find eschatological references instead that could, in light of modern scientific knowledge of physics, refer to future physical changes in the quantum state of the universe, phase changes willed by God to reinfuse baryons into impoverished regions of space-time, or compacted space-time unwinding at a faster rate. Political evolutionists versus creationists tend to gloss over the rights of individuals to have good government and better personal economic prospects. One may fly a jet airplane with faith, messing up the atmosphere and the life prospects for others on the ground. Yet, if that is all one has, and not a pilot's training, it is unfair for the passengers should the incompetent pilot with faith somehow get elected to take control somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean if there are qualified pilots aboard, and vice versa if a president pretends to have faith and has not. He may be deceiving the public and the voters. There may be no qualified politicians running for the presidency today that could do a good job if elected. Maybe a president does need faith and is a kind of kamikaze economic pilot training with belief that tax cuts for the rich will better the prospects of the poor through trickle-down and reverse osmosis from China. Einstein's relativity theories created new ways of regarding time. If time in the entire universe were compressed into a small area in the beginning, yet its content was entirely provided then, and it took 6 days up front and 13.7 billion years to unwind, so far one encounters an example of the different context possible for the interpretation of time literals in the biblical Genesis story and in cosmology. For modern cosmology, relativity makes time something of a locally measured rate of change. The underlying physical constants are thought to have the same values everywhere once the initial values of creation are set, yet locally they may be compacted and arrayed in different forms. Many biblical fundamentalists prefer a simple criteria for the time of the universe and its construction, while evolutionists prefer more complexity. In a way, though, the evolutionist-creationist debate itself seems somewhat parochial to those regarding the entire universe and the creation of an entire universe and possible universes, wherein time is entirely contingent, subject to the atemporal, pre-universal field of the unknown, and possible universes become finite points along an infinite, in all directions and dimensions, continuous spectrum within relativistic paradigm. God has many mansions and infinite capacity to create universes and experience, though he may set the values of a particular universe as constants for a particular universe. Christians know that God has laws and criteria for the universe that make everyone accountable to his judgment and will. Christians, not those without faith, are not exempt from the laws of gravity, the laws of nature, the moral laws, or the requirements to act responsibly for the conservation of the world's resources. Christians are not free to pursue riotous liberal quantitative resource consumption and trust that God will pick up the environmental tab. Christians should know that the biblical prophets were ordinary people selected to experience ideas from God. They were not rocket scientists, did not put on the Star Trek high-tech helmet of advanced future knowledge, learning, and wrote down what they should do to serve God's will for mankind in the evolution of history. Those prophets acted for their own time and for the future. It is unimaginable that Daniel could have foreseen the knowledge of mankind today, nor the context in which his prophecies might be interpreted. Jeremiah and John the Baptist experienced the words of God, yet few prophets, or perhaps none, wrote much about the technical nature of cosmology or the elements of the periodic table technically. And why should they? Did God prefer to have all of human experience fully assembled in a completed state early on as if it were a manufactured robot? On the nature of cosmology today, mathematical development has allowed a hypothetical digital analog quantification of the content of the visible universe with computers and of the not entirely chaotic evolution of physical particle waves, though its material phases from time equaled nearly zero to the present and perhaps in the future until time omega. The entire material structure of mass of the universe is, however, superimposed upon a realm of quantum uncertainty that is an ineffable mystery. From the realm of quantum uncertainty, it is believed emerge particle waves that build up sufficiently to let mass exist within space. The representation of the mass energy of this universe through human thought is an epistemological relationship of the uncertain nature of mind to the mass energy of the universe, and of the universe for itself along with its uncertainty foundation. The universe and its mass energy are given a template of mathematical abstraction, and the relations of the elements of that universe set are made to be consistent universally. Any universal representation, though, fades out at the edges of knowledge and certainty necessarily from the largest to the smallest, making universal and meta-universal cosmologies sorts of contingent phenomenalities that have validity locally and relatively, yet necessarily not transcendently, as that would inevitably be a violation of scientific rules of order regarding certainty and probability. Much of the debate between finite and evolution, phenomenalists and Christian fundamentalists seem philosophically anachronistic. It is easy to have faith in God while discarding faith in politicians. It is simple to recognize that a bad environment, a poor standard of living, the desire to concentrate wealth or power, the unwillingness to work for the benefit of society are fundamental values of corruption, reinforced by disinterpreters of democracy and free enterprise and preference for Chicago mobster-style rule. Faith in God does not require corrupt ecospheric destruction, ecospherically deleterious fossil fuel automobile use, or the destruction of the world biosphere, nor does economic health or the future of life on Earth better its prospects through the perversion of moral values. Mankind cannot improve its world situation by destroying moral reason or destroying ecospheric and social prosperity behind the excuse of theological dispensation. The inability to make the world a better place right away is the result of political stupidity, the square peg and round hole syndrome. Political dogmatism is a lot cheaper for a square peg round hole political thought than creative inventive intelligence. The United States has a stagnant transportation and housing infrastructure mal-designed for environmental conservation or affordability, and a number of other issues not too difficult to solve with better politicians and more faith in God and mankind's ability to adapt to a challenging planetary environment.